Welcome to Social Science, Standard 10, History, Unit 1, Outbreak of World War I and its Aftermath. Part 4, Russian Revolution. Russian Revolution and its impact. Introduction. The biggest outcome of the war, the Russian Revolution, was unique in world history. The socio-political and economic conditions prevailing in Russia were brought to a head by the vast losses and suffering caused by the war. There were really two revolutions in the year 1917, one in March and another one in November. On the abdication of the Tsar, the Porteous government, which followed, wanted to continue the war, but the people were against it. So, there was a second great uprising under the guidance of their leader Lenin, who seized power and established a communist government in Russia. Causes of the revolution. Social causes. In Russia, Peter the Great and Catherine II attempted westernization without changing the social conditions. The Russian peasants were serfs tied to land owned by wealthy Russians. After Russia's defeat in the Crimean War, some reforms were introduced. In 1861, Tsar Alexander II abolished serfdom and emancipated the serfs, but they were not given enough land to subsist. These peasants became the power hook of the revolution. The laborers and workers whose numbers had increased on account of industrialization were aggrieved as they called very low wages. Role of revolutionaries. The spread of revolutionary ideas among the intelligentsia and their repression by the Tsar's government made the socialistically inclined students to carry their propaganda to the peasantry. Soon, based on the Marxist philosophy, new ideas began to take shape, and a social and democratic labor party was formed. Autocracy of the Tsar. Tsar Nicholas II of Romanov dynasty had little experience of government. His wife Tsarina Alexandra was a dominant personality, and Nicholas was under her strong influence, determined that Russia should not be left out in the scramble for colonial possessions. Nicholas encouraged Russian expansion in Manchuria. This provoked a war with Japan in 1904. A resulting Russian defeat led to strikes and riots. On 22nd January 1905, Father Capon, a priest, organized a march of men, women, and children on the Tsar's Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, demanding a representative national assembly and agrarian and industrial reforms. But police and soldiers fired on the procession. Hundreds were killed and many thousands wounded. The events of this day led to riots, strikes, and violence. Nicholas was forced to grant a constitution and establish a parliament, the Duma. This was no longer satisfactory to the left-wing parties and formed a Soviet of workers' delegates in St. Petersburg led by Trotsky. Opposition to Tsar and dissolution of Duma. The outbreak of the First World War strengthened the monarchy as Russia allied to France and Britain. As there was rumor of the palace revolution, Nicholas made himself the commander-in-chief of the army. At the end of 1916, Rasputin, who had a domineering influence over the Tsar and the Tsarina, was murdered by a member of the Tsar's family. The members of the St. Petersburg Soviets were arrested. Whenever the Duma opposed the Tsar's move, it was dissolved and fresh elections held. Without change of government policy, the Fourth Duma ended with the revolution of 1917. Popular uprising. The bread shortages among women textile workers, many with husbands in the army, forced them to go on strikes anyway, and marched through the factory areas of Petrograd, the capital of the Russian Empire. Masses of women workers demanding bread for workers waved their arms towards factory workers and shouted, "Come out! Stop work!" In the cities, 400,000 workers joined the movement the next day. Abdication of Tsar. The government used the troops to break the strike, but soon mutinies broke out in the barracks. The Tsar ordered a declaration of martial law, but his order was not broadcast in the city as there was no one to do this job. The Tsar then tried to return to Petrograd. The railway workers stopped his train. The general at the front and some leaders in Petrograd, frightened by these developments, pleaded with the Tsar to abdicate. On March 15, Nicholas II abdicated. Provisional government. There were two parallel bodies to take on government functions. One was of the Portuguese politicians of the old state Duma, comprising propertied classes, and other there were workers' delegates drawn together in the Workers' Council or Soviet. Those in the Duma were able to form the provincial government with the consent of the Soviets. The Soviet was dominated by Mensheviks, and the minority Bolsheviks were timid and undecided. The situation changed with the arrival of Lenin. Failure of provincial government. Lenin was in Switzerland when the revolution broke out. Lenin wanted revolution. His slogan of "all power to the Soviets" soon won over the workers' leaders. Devastated by wartime shortages, the people were attracted by the slogan of bread, peace, and land. But the provincial government made two grave mistakes. First, it demanded for the redistribution of land, and the other was the government decided to continue with the war. Frustrated peasant soldiers deserted their posts and joined those who had resorted to land grabbing. This intensified the rising in Petrograd led by Bolsheviks. The government banned Pravda and arrested all Bolsheviks. Trotsky was also arrested. Takeover by the Bolsheviks party under Lenin's leadership. In October, Lenin persuaded the Bolsheviks Central Committee to decide on immediate revolution. Trotsky prepared a detailed plan. On 7 November, the key government buildings, including the Winter Palace, the Prime Minister's headquarters, were seized by armed factory workers and revolutionary troops. On 8 November 1917, a new communist government was in office in Russia. Its head this time was Lenin. The Bolshevik party was renamed the Russian Communist Party. Here, briefly, we are going to see about Lenin. Lenin was born in 1870 near the middle Volga to educated parents. Influenced by the ideas of Karl Marx, Lenin believed that the way for freedom was through mass action. Lenin gained the support of small majority, that is Bolsheviks, Polsinotova, known as Bolsheviks, which became the Bolshevik party. His opponents in minority, Menshistova, were called Mensheviks. Outcome of the revolution. The Russian Communist Party eliminated illiteracy and poverty in Russia within a record time. Russian industry and agriculture developed remarkably. Women were given equal rights, including right to vote. Industries and banks were nationalized. Land was announced as social property. Land was distributed to poor peasants. Lenin thought the most important factor for the fall of provincial government was its failure to withdraw from World War. So Lenin immediately appealed for peace. Unmindful of the harsh terms dictated by the Central Powers, Lenin opted for withdrawing from the war to concentrate on the formation of a new government. In March 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed. Global influence of the Russian Revolution. The revolution fired people's imagination across the world. In many countries, communist parties were formed. The Russian communist government encouraged the colonists to fight for their freedom. Debates over key issues, land reforms, social welfare workers, rights, and gender equality started taking place in global context. Here we should know about Pravda. Pravda is a Russian word meaning truth. It was the official newspaper of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1918 to 1991. Thank you. We'll see the next part.